A lot of writers like the idea of a plot twist. But before you go about bending your story into some odd shape, a word of caution is in order. Twisting your plot brings with it some significant risks. A bad plot twist is enough to ruin a good story. So today, we're going to talk about 6 terrible plot twists that you'll probably want to steer clear of. Get it? Because steering is like twisting. Like twisting a car. Anyway, first up is the oops, I'm still alive plot twist. This twist happens when you have a character who the reader thinks ordered the fish sandwich early on in the story, only for that same character to show up happy and healthy later on in the story. Like a lot of bad plot twists, this one requires the reader to very quickly reshuffle a lot of the story in their minds. It invalidates a lot of the emotions that the reader may have felt about events earlier on in the narrative, especially if the death of the character in question was particularly emotionally impactful. Also, at the point where the character opts for the extended warranty, the writer often shows that scene in such gory detail in order to convince the reader that the character has indeed called customer service, to the point where there's no believable way that the character could have survived that encounter with customer service. Or the death scene is so vague, or it happens off the page, in which case the reader will always have some doubts that the character is actually gone. You also have the issue of bringing the character back. If this happens through some kind of magical or technological means, that's okay. But once you let that particular life-saving cat out of the bag, no other character death is going to have the same sort of impact. You will be ruining the effect of this on your story for the rest of your story. I think that in general, taking characters off the board is not a good idea anyway for a whole bunch of reasons. Retroactively ruining whatever benefit that a character death would have in the first place, it's just not a good idea, and that's why this twist usually doesn't work out. Next up, this Magguffin is actually useless twist. When your plot revolves around retrieving a certain object, then you have a Magguffin. A Magguffin can literally be anything that both the heroes and the villains of your story want to retrieve. It could be a big box of gold, a launch code to a nuclear missile, an orphaned child with special powers, the key to the bathroom. Doesn't matter what it is, a Magguffin plot is about getting that thing, not what the thing is. But usually towards the end of a Magguffin story, some group of characters do get their hands on the Magguffin, and that's where there's the potential for a bad twist. If the Magguffin turns out to be worthless, or a fake, or rusted out, or just plain not in the briefcase that everyone's been fighting over for the rest of the novel, then you risk there being some problems. Now, this can work. A lot of good Magguffin stories do end with the Magguffin being useless. Stories like The Maltese Falcon center around a Magguffin that turns out to be worthless. So this is not categorically a bad twist. What you do need to understand, though, is the effect that this worthlessness of the Magguffin will have on the rest of the plot. This twist will work to make the entire pursuit of the Magguffin pointless. It works well in stories that center thematically around greed or hubris, but that might not be the kind of note you want to strike. In the wrong Magguffin story, having the Magguffin be worthless could just ruin the entire story if there isn't that deeper thematic message around greed or hubris or the other things that I talked about. Next up, bad twist number 3, the evil villain destroys themselves. This is closely related to the Magguffin thing, but basically involves an evil plot by an evil villain which the heroes fail to stop. After defeating the heroes, the villain steps up to hit the big red button on their giant space laser or doomsday reactor or biological agent dispersal device, and poof, something shorts out, the villain blows up, their machine explodes, the day is saved by poor electrical engineering and hubris. Raiders of the Lost Ark sort of does this in its ending. There's been some essays and a bunch of analysis about that movie, and there are some valid points there, so it's kind of an example of this. The biggest problem with this sort of twist is that you risk removing agency from your protagonists. They don't become the ones who take down the villain does it themselves. You don't want to end up in a situation where you could potentially remove your hero from the story entirely and the villain will still get defeated. Next up, bad twist number 4. The villain was actually doing something good. In these stories, the villain appears to be working towards some kind of obviously evil thing, like plotting to destroy every Boston cream donut in the world, and the heroes, understandably, try to thwart this plan. But at the 3/4 mark of the story, it's revealed that by destroying the best kind of donut in the world, the villain will actually be preventing an ancient prophecy from coming to light that would see the world ruled by a tyrannical race of jelly donuts. The villain is creating a big problem, but that's under the auspices of preventing an even bigger problem. They are doing villainy at a level 5 to prevent a level 10 villainy thing from happening. The issue with this sort of twist is that the bigger problem often isn't revealed until later on in the story, which means you need to very quickly readjust the plot and the goals and the actions and the motivations and the relationships of the characters in order to solve this new, bigger problem that you're introducing really late in the story. You need to get the reader invested in stopping the villain from the start of the story, but then at the last part of the story, you now need to get them invested in stopping this bigger problem, something that you may not have established up to this point in the narrative. Or if the problem isn't revealed until after the villain is defeated, it's like you've finished the main story and now we're tacking on this extra story right at the end. So it's not even necessarily a twist, it's just an extra story that has to be gone through in order to resolve all the conflict. This type of twist is ultimately problematic because it violates reader expectations, it makes the story perhaps too unpredictable, and it negates a lot of the foreshadowing that's probably had to happen earlier on in the story. Where I think this can work is if the bigger problem that's revealed at the end is meant to set off a sequel. So if book 1 involves defeating the villain, and then you set up book 2 by having to deal with the bigger problem that the villain was trying to prevent, which is now going to happen because the heroes stopped them from preventing it, this allows book 1 to be a nice, complete story, and you can sort of end on a bit of a cliffhanger with this bigger problem that the heroes now need to solve, which sets up book 2 quite well. The Mistborn series does this, and I think it works really well in that series because book 1 is very much a standalone, dealing with one problem and one particular villain, and then the problem that that villain was actually preventing ends up being dealt with in books 2 and 3. Where this doesn't work is when it's just meant to add extra drama or shock value at the end of a story. It just messes up the foreshadowing, it ruins what the reader was expecting, usually doesn't land that well. It took me almost 10 years from the time I decided to write a novel until I actually wrote something that could be loosely called a novel, and it still wasn't great. If you don't want to wait that long, if you want some help with getting your first novel started and finished in way less time, then check out my novel writing program available at the link in the video description. Over the course of 50-ish lessons, I walk you through every part of the novel writing process, from coming up with an idea, planning out your plot, developing your characters, and writing good prose. This course will not turn you into a great writer, but it will turn you into a writer who can finish a novel consistently. So please click the link in the video description and give it a try if it's something that you're interested in. Sorry. I was dreaming that I was plugging a course or something. Anyway, what's the next twist that we're talking about? Ah, this makes sense. The "it was all a dream" twist. This is any scene or even an entire story that's revealed to not have actually happened. It turns out that it was a dream or a fantasy or a drug-induced hallucination, and none of the events that we just witnessed actually happened. The dream scenes become especially problematic when big revelations or plot points or character moments are revealed to have not actually happened. This requires the reader to very quickly reframe all of the events up to this point. they may have difficulty figuring out what matters and what doesn't. Like if the characters watch their friend eat a filet-o-fish sandwich, but it turns out they dreamed it, do they still think differently about their friend? Has their friend actually changed? Does any of that character development actually matter? It's hard for the reader to know. The "it was all a dream" scenes are usually only used for shock value, or for things that the writer is afraid to actually do because of the impact that they'll have on the rest of the story. Unless you have a very compelling reason to negate a bunch of plot development by having it be just a dream, I would steer clear of this particular twist. And lastly, the sixth and final twist that we're going to talk about today, the "this won't matter in 5 minutes" twist. This is not a specific structure of a twist, but rather how you handle a twist. This is any sort of twist that happens and then is very quickly undone, causing it to ultimately have no effect on the story. Oh no, the hero's best friend turned heel and joins the villains. But wait, 1 or 2 chapters later, they turn back to the good side. Oh no, the cure for the highly engineered super virus doesn't actually work. But wait, it actually needs to go in the water, not in the air or something. Oh no, the death ray that can melt the alien invaders got blown up. But wait, that weird oddball character that no one really liked the whole time was actually building an identical death ray in his basement. So that problem is solved now. When you put a twist in for shock value and then undo that twist shortly after, that's almost never good. A good twist needs to have impact, not just be a pointless diversion. Yes, usually the effects of a twist need to be dealt with, but the twist should actually cause the direction of the story to change in a significant way. This can happen with almost any twist, so if you do want to put a twist into your story, make sure that the effects that it has are large enough that they actually impact the story. Just like I hope this video was large enough to impact you, I guess. Anyway. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, please check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.